How can I confront the pain of losing someone I loved while simultaneously discovering who I really am? This question echoes in my mind as I walk through a maze of memories and difficult choices. My name is Sarah, and life recently presented me with one of its cruelest challenges: the death of my mother, a woman who was the anchor of my existence. Since that tragedy, I feel like I am floating in a sea of uncertainties, struggling to find my place in this world. I live in a small town in the rural United States, where every corner holds a memory of my childhood. My mother's house, now empty and silent, is a constant reminder of what I've lost. The walls that once vibrated with laughter now whisper secrets of a past that feels distant. However, this once comforting environment has transformed into an emotional battlefield, where I fight against guilt and sadness. The town, which should feel like home, now resembles a prison, with grief weighing heavily on my shoulders. The loss of my mother wasn't just a physical separation, it felt as if a part of me had been ripped away. Looking in the mirror, I see a stranger reflected back, a young woman who no longer knows who she is without her presence by my side. Amidst this turmoil, the pressure to meet societal and familial expectations only intensifies. Everyone expects me to move on, but how can I do that when my identity is so intertwined with hers? It is in this moment of vulnerability that an old diary of my mother's appears, like a light at the end of the tunnel. The pages are filled with her thoughts, dreams, and fears, and as I read them, I feel like I am discovering a new facet of her and, at the same time, of myself. Each written word prompts me to reflect on her life, her choices, and her longings. This leads me to a profound dilemma: should I follow the path she wished for me, or should I find my own? Through this journey of self-discovery, I realize that the truth about who I am is hidden in the interstices of the pain and love we shared. The search for truth is not just about understanding the past, it is also about forging a new beginning, a rebirth amid tragedy. And so, with each page I turn, hope begins to sprout in my heart, showing me that even after loss, it is possible to find light again. As the pages of the diary unfold in my hands, I realize that each word written by my mother is an echo of her hopes and fears. The stories of her youth, her frustrations, and her victories intertwine with my memories. But as I delve deeper, I realize it's not only the accounts of the past that affect me, it's the challenges that present themselves before me now. How can I honor her memory while simultaneously discovering who I am? One night, while flipping through the diary, a passage caught my attention. She spoke about her own struggle with depression. I never knew my mother faced this silent battle. The weight of her words hit me like a wave, and I realized that her pain wasn't so different from mine. What struck me most was the idea that despite her suffering, she always fought to give me the best. This made me question, am I also capable of fighting for myself? I decided I needed support. I started attending a grief support group. Although I was nervous at first, I met people who were going through similar experiences. There was Tom, an older man who had lost his wife after a long battle with cancer, and Lisa, a young woman still trying to cope with the sudden death of her brother. Each of them brought their own stories, and in each account, I felt a fragment of my pain reflected back at me. Yet, at the same time, there was a collective strength beginning to envelop me. Still, the journey was not easy. On a particularly difficult day, I went to a local cafe that I used to frequent with my mother. The smell of fresh coffee and the familiar sounds flooded me with memories. In a moment of weakness, a wave of sadness overwhelmed me. Tears streamed down my face as I remembered our moments together. Suddenly, a woman approached me. It was a childhood friend, Clara. She sat down and instead of asking how I was, she simply offered a silent hug. In that moment, I realized that even in the midst of pain, human connections could still bring me comfort. Over time, the support group began to help me structure my life. But as I started to rise again, a new difficulty emerged. My grandmother, who had always been a strong figure in my life, began showing signs of dementia. The weight of this situation piled onto me as I tried to care for my grandmother while also processing the loss of my mother. Responsibilities were piling up, and I felt increasingly overwhelmed. Would I be able to handle all this? The group meetings became a vital space where I could share my insecurities. One day, after venting about my grandmother, Tom looked at me and said, "You don't have to carry this alone." Sometimes, asking for help is the greatest demonstration of strength. His words resonated within me. I had been so focused on being strong that I had neglected the need for support. With this in mind, I decided to seek professional help. I began therapy, and the therapist helped me to express my pain and explore emotions I had kept bottled up for so long. During the sessions, I confronted not only the loss of my mother but also the fear of losing my grandmother and the guilt I felt for not always being present to care for her. It was a painful but necessary process. Meanwhile, my mother's diary continued to guide me. Each passage inspired me to be bolder and to confront my fears. In one of my journal entries, I wrote about how life is made up of new beginnings, and how each one brings the opportunity to grow. This idea became a mantra for me. I was not just dealing with pain, I was transforming. However, the truth is that life is not linear. In a moment of hope, a new twist emerged. An old school friend, who had always had a special affection for me, started reaching out. Lucas had returned to town and, upon seeing me, offered his support. At first, I was hesitant. What did this mean? Was I ready to open my heart again? However, Lucas was kind and understanding, and gradually, our friendship deepened. But, like in any good story, obstacles arose. Clara, my childhood friend, began to feel jealous of our friendship. In a moment of venting, she confronted Lucas, which resulted in a fight that left me even more confused. I found myself in the middle of a conflict that seemed to reflect the internal confusion I was already facing. How could I balance these two important relationships while still trying to understand myself? With each challenge I faced, I realized that pain was not a barrier, but a bridge that connected me to others and to myself. I learned that pain is a part of the human experience, and that by sharing, we can find not only understanding but also strength. Thus, my journey was not just about loss, but about discovering who I am, a strong woman capable of loving and being loved, even amidst pain. One day, while I was at home, I received a call that would change everything. It was from the hospital. My grandmother had suffered a fall and was being taken to the emergency room. My heart raced. The feeling of helplessness engulfed me. I was already dealing with so much pain, and now this? I rushed to the hospital, my mind filled with confusing thoughts and fears. What if it was serious? What would I do without her? Upon arriving, I found the medical team, but my focus was solely on the image of my grandmother, always so strong and full of life, now lying on a stretcher, with a confused and distant look in her eyes. The doctor explained that she had suffered a hip fracture. It was a condition that would require surgery and a long recovery. Hearing this, I felt a wave of despair. In addition to losing my mother, I was now facing the possibility of losing my grandmother. As I waited in the waiting room, the emotional pressure mounted. I remembered my mother's journal, her struggles, and the strength she always sought in difficult moments. But at that moment, I couldn't feel strong. I was about to face a storm that felt unbearable. What would I do if my grandmother didn't recover? The thought of losing another strong woman in my life paralyzed me. When I finally got to see her, my chest tightened. She smiled at me, but there was a sadness in her eyes that I had never seen before. "I'm fine, dear," she said with effort, trying to comfort me. I knew it was her attempt to calm me, but inside, I was shattered. The fear of not being able to care for her, of not being up to the circumstances, consumed me. After the surgery, my grandmother remained hospitalized for a few days. During that time, I realized I was not just fighting against the possibility of her loss, I was fighting against my own vulnerability. I had tried so hard to be strong, but now I felt fragile and scared. The support I had found in the support group and therapy felt distant, as if I were on a deserted island with no one to help me. One day, while waiting for news of her recovery, I looked out of a hospital window. The sky was gray, and the rain began to fall. The image of my mother came to mind, and I remembered that she had always talked about the power of vulnerability. I recalled a passage from her journal where she mentioned that opening up to others was a way to find strength. With this in mind, I decided I couldn't continue fighting alone. In the support group, I began to share how I felt. I talked about my constant worry for my grandmother's health and the fear of losing another important person. To my surprise, people began to approach me. Tom shared stories about how he cared for his wife during her illness, and Lisa spoke about the pain she felt in dealing with the loss of her brother. What had once seemed an unbearable burden was now becoming a space for sharing and understanding. However, the situation at home did not improve. When my grandmother returned home, the reality of dementia became even more evident. Small conversations became challenging, and I found myself repeating the same questions multiple times. This left me frustrated and sad. I tried to be patient, but the pain of repetition made me feel as if I were losing the woman I had always known. The internal struggle began to transform into an external battle between the desire to care for her and the need to preserve my own sanity. At this moment, Lucas became an even more important presence in my life. He began visiting me frequently, bringing small surprises like coffee or a book he knew I would like. He was the anchor I didn't realize I needed. But at the same time, the tension with Clara increased. She began to pull away, and I felt as though I was losing a part of my childhood while trying to build a future with Lucas. One night, in an honest conversation, Clara confronted me about my friendship with Lucas. She felt left out, and I realized that in my search for support, I had neglected the friendship that had always meant so much to me. Clara's words hit me deeply, and I understood that I had become so focused on seeking comfort that I had lost connection with the people who had always been by my side. This was my turning point. I realized that I couldn't continue like this. It wasn't just about me, it was about everyone around me. Pain and struggle are part of life, but human connections are what truly matter. With that in mind, I decided I needed to find a balance. I began to dedicate time to both Lucas and Clara, and to open my heart to both sides. These new discoveries taught me that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but rather an open door to strength. I learned that I didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. Now, more than ever, I knew that healing was not just about facing my fears, but also about allowing the people I loved to help me carry that weight. And so, with each step, I was not only honoring the memory of my mother and grandmother, but also discovering the woman I truly was: strong, vulnerable, and ready to face life's challenges. I learned that life is full of challenges, and those challenges can teach us valuable lessons. The journey I went through with my grandmother and the pain of losing my mother were difficult moments, but they were also opportunities for growth. I used to feel alone, thinking I had to be strong all the time. But as I faced my grandmother's decline and her struggle to recover, I realized that true strength comes from opening my heart and accepting help from others. When I decided to share my feelings in the support group, something changed inside me. The stories of others, their struggles and victories, showed me that I was not alone. This connection gave me the courage to face my fears. I learned that vulnerability is a bridge that connects us to others, not a weakness. With each conversation, with each shared tear, I felt a little lighter. Over time, I realized I couldn't let the fear of loss paralyze me. My grandmother's dementia was a challenge, but it was also an opportunity to show her the love we had always shared. Instead of focusing on what I was losing, I began to cherish the moments we still had together. I became more patient, more present, and this brought me a new perspective on life. I found joy in the little things, a smile, a shared memory, a story from her youth. Friendships also became a fundamental pillar for me. Lucas and Clara showed me that mutual support is essential. By reconnecting with Clara, I realized that friendship is a treasure that must be cultivated. Together, we went through these challenging moments, and it strengthened our bond. I learned that success is not just about material achievements, but about the relationships we build and the love we share. Now, whenever I face a challenge, I remember what I've learned. I don't have to face everything alone. Life is a journey that should be shared. Love, vulnerability, and friendship are the keys to overcoming obstacles. Each difficulty I've faced has taught me something new about myself and the world around me. Today, I am grateful for every experience, as they have transformed me into a stronger, wiser person, more open to new connections. One day, while caring for my grandmother, something unexpected happened. She was more confused than ever, and I realized that the weight of the situation was crushing me. Frustration and sadness began to consume me. I remember sitting beside her, trying to explain a memory she could no longer grasp. It was in that moment that, in a split second, everything became unbearable. Anger, pain, and fear mixed within me, and tears started to flow down my face. Seeing my grandmother, so vulnerable and lost, broke my heart. I felt as if I were losing not only her memories but also the part of me that felt connected to her. It was at that moment that I realized I could no longer carry this burden alone. The vulnerability I had feared so much became my only pathway to true strength. I needed to open up. I needed to admit that I wasn't okay. With a lump in my throat, I called Clara. When she arrived, I didn't need to say anything. I simply hugged her, and the tears flowed freely. Clara listened to me, and in that exchange of words and silences, I found the peace I had been seeking. Together, we decided that we would not only face this, but that we would create memories, even if they were small. From that day on, I transformed my pain into love. I began making photo albums, telling stories about my grandmother's life, dancing with her in the living room, even if she no longer kept up with the rhythm. With each laugh and each tear, I realized that even amidst loss, there was an invaluable richness, the love we shared. This was the true overcoming. I learned that while life brings challenges, it also gives us the opportunity to reconnect with what truly matters. As time passed, I realized that my journey of overcoming was not just about caring for my grandmother, but about rediscovering the beauty of life around us. Each shared laugh and each rescued memory became vital for both of us. I learned to appreciate the small moments, to find joy in simple things, and to understand that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the love and connections we cultivate. Then one day, while organizing the photo albums, an old letter from my grandmother fell out from between the pages. It was a letter she had never sent, written to my grandfather. As I read those words, I realized that her love transcended time and memory. This discovery transformed me once again. Not only was I caring for her, but she was also teaching me how to live. Now, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Share in the comments how you found strength in difficult moments. Remember, each interaction helps spread stories that may touch someone's heart. Like and subscribe for more content that inspires and transforms lives. Together, let's create a community that values every moment.